Welcome back to another episode of PropSutras. Now, whether you're an investor or a home buyer or just someone who's curious about the in and outs of urban living and real estate, PropSutra is your go-to podcast. Every week, we break down key topics in the property world, offering insights and expert advice from people who've been there and done that. In this episode, we are particularly diving into the rental markets, from what renters should prioritize in a metro city to navigating neighborly concerns legal must know. So whether you're renting or letting, there's something here for you. Joining us today is a very special guest, Mr. Balaji Rao, an industry expert with over 35 years of experience in real estate. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So since we're talking about renting and this episode is specifically about that, it can be a daunting task when you're renting in a metro cities. So as an individual, if I'm looking out to rent an apartment or a home, what should be my top 3 priorities?
I would assume people choose renting as the first option before you zero in on a micro locality that is suitable to you, to your family, to your vocation, profession. So I think the first thing one should check out is whether the location or the area itself is suitable. So whether you want to be in Bandra or Wadala or Kolaba or Powai or anywhere else in the country, that needs to be first zeroed in and checked out. You understand? Because if you're in the wrong locality, then naturally everything goes a little bit sideways. After checking out the locality, I think you would basically try to check out the infrastructure around it to see whether the physical, the social, the transportation, the what I would call having a life after the work hours, whether you will have a proper sort of a economic infrastructure where you have workspaces around, co-working spaces. So you will look at that sort of a thing to see whether that place has it. In the sense, you might not want to be in a boondocks, which are where you're cut off, in those neck of woods. So I would assume you would look at that, which is very, very aligned with the locality. Locality is more for your closeness and proximity to other friends and family members and to your workplace. But when you look at from an infrastructure point of view, it is to see whether that locality, though you prefer, has the right infrastructure for you to really grow in. And finally, I think what's most important where people sometimes tend to neglect is that particular location or the building or the landlord or the flat or the neighbors. That is what we call, loosely you can call it gentry. Because if you're not very comfortable with your landlord, if you're not very comfortable with your immediate neighborhood, then I would think that you would have a much tougher time staying there, living there, being happy about it. So, besides all the so called economic factors, like size and whether you have 1 BHK or 2 BHK, how much are you paying and what deposit are you paying, those are all hygiene factors one would look at. Most people tend to stumble on the third factor. So, for example, you might know you want to stay in a place like Indiranagar in Bangalore. So, you will like it. And you will go and check it out. The micro location is good, it's close to your friends and family, and it's close to your office place. But suppose the neighborhood is not very conducive to you. You're a young girl, you might like to party, you might like to sleep late, you might like to listen to music, and the neighborhood or your immediate neighbors are a little bit older, senior, conservative, orthodox. They might not like your bohemian lifestyle.
Right.
In which case, they will make your life miserable as much as you're making their life miserable. So, that aspect is quite often overlooked in renting. And that comes to a very jarring sort of a standstill. Once you start living in it, and after a month or two, you find it's quite stifling and you want to now opt out.
when I go to look for a flat rentals, the first thing that I see is it furnished or is it unfurnished. So is it advisable to pay a premium for a fully furnished flat, and is there something I should insist the landlord on providing?
I think the ideal balance out there is to have it what you don't want to invest in. Like, for example, you might not want to invest in air conditions because they might be specific to room sizes and whether you need a split or a window. You might not want to invest in cupboards because, again, they'll be specific to the particular flat. It would not be standard size usually if you really want good cupboards. So but you might have your own bed and mattress. You understand? You might have a dining table and chairs or sofa, maybe, and you might be ambivalent about it. But there's certain things which he should provide. You understand? Like, especially in my opinion, he should provide cupboards, lights, ceiling fans. He should provide curtains, curtain rods, because these are very specific to a flat. What you can come in with, as I said, is your uh, goods like furniture and fittings like your dining table, sofa.
Correct. So now, as someone who's been renting out in Bombay for the last 6 years, I don't necessarily have my agreement for more than 1 year because you don't know about your job preferences and how you'll switch. So, but there's a 5% year-on-year escalation every year. Do you think that is justified?
See, it is justified from the point of view of inflation. Anything to do with property, the first thing the landlord wants is to keep it hedged against inflation. So if you have a running inflation of 4 to 5%, which we know we do, he naturally wants his rental to also keep pace with the inflation. That's the first step. That's why it is there, 4% or 5%. Two, ideally in an agreement, you should be signing a 3 year agreement with a 1 year lock in and then have a notice period. Because in a 3 year agreement, you will save on the stamp duty a little bit rather than renewing the lease every year. And you would have also blocked the base rate with the 5% increase. Otherwise, every year you'll be sitting with him to negotiate. And in case you don't like it after 1 year, you'll always leave it.
If I'm wanting to run a business from home, like a baking or a boutique or something like that, should I inform about that?
Yes, and I don't think many people will agree with it again because if it is a residential leave-in license or a lease, using it for commercial purposes is always frowned upon. The only few exceptions are if you're a professional and you're using it to discharge your professional duties. For example, if you're a doctor, you might have a small clinic in your residence. If you're a lawyer, you might have a small office in your residence. So that has to be specified. If you're a teacher or a tutor, you might hold tuition classes. But there also people react to it because the number of people who come to your house, the influx of people, they will claim is spoiling the lift or dirtying the landings or the lobby. So they can be problems, but usually, legally speaking, they can't stop you. If I'm a teacher and I'm holding tuition classes, it's very difficult to stop them. But can they make your life a bit miserable by keeping on cribbing and coming and interrupting? They can. So it's better to thrash it out upfront. But if you thrash it out upfront, whether they'll agree to it or not, again will depend upon the clout of your landlord and their generosity. Because if you straight away say, look, I'm going to take this place and I'm going to run it as a cloud kitchen, I don't know if everybody will like it. Because they'll think that there will be 100 delivery people going up and down every day.
Also, every building has different amenities. Like there's a gym, there's a clubhouse, there's a swimming pool. So sometimes the tenants are not allowed to use it. So can the landlord include and exclude these amenities? I mean, is it
No, first,
justified?
uh, it's not justified, agreed. Because those amenities have been kept for the residents, not just for owners. And when people come to these sort of complexes, they come there because of the amenities. So you can't really say you shouldn't use my swimming pool or you can't use the gym. So it is not at all justified. So it's better to clarify upfront that there are no such rules by the society which excludes a tenant from using those. Like many societies, more than amenities, they'll tell you that tenants' car parking is given the least preference. If as a landlord I have a car park and it is a society sort of a compound and they allot car parks, they give the landlord preference over tenant. So these are not really in the right spirit of leasing. But if such a thing is there, it's better for you to know upfront rather than figure it out later. My belief, what happens in real life is the broker blindsides you because you will meet the landlord only once or twice before signing the agreement. And your ability to meet your neighbors or the building chairman or the secretary of the society is even more less. Most of the time, you won't see them also, you won't meet them. So, you are going in a very blindsided way into the agreement. But if you take the effort to try and meet them, even if the broker is not very keen for you to meet them, you will have a better idea. Like I always feel, if you just ring the neighbor's door and ask them, you'll definitely have a better idea what's happening in the society. No?
With your experience, sir, do you think there's anything missing in the current standard rental agreement in India?
It is not the standard rental agreement. As I said, what is missing is the sort of a cultured, civilized practice of the tenant meeting the neighbors or the building. It doesn't take long, but it helps to clear the air. Because even the building society should know, are you single? Are you married? Do you have children? Do you have pets? What sort of a lifestyle do you have? Suppose you're working with the airlines, you might be going off in the night or coming in the middle of night. So if people know about it, it's much better than somebody just leaking it in, and one fine day the neighbor suddenly sees he has a new tenant in the adjacent flat, and who plays loud music or who puts the trash out at odd hours or whatever it is. So these are things which usually would have got worked through an open dialogue. And that open dialogue is not captured in any agreement or anything. It's only assumed that you know everything. And that is what I think is most important.
All right, so in this segment, we'll be talking about investing in rentals because for landlords, when they give their property out on rent, it's more than just finding a tenant, it's about protecting their property. So, if I am subletting a place or I'm giving a place for rent, how do I make it attractive for tenants?
From a landlord's perspective, I feel the first thing any landlord should understand, if he has an asset, and that's why you're saying he will be wanting to protect his asset. That's fair enough. So that depends upon whom he's renting it out to, your profile, you know. But more importantly, I think he has to first look at what he is giving out. If I was a landlord, I would ensure that my property is clean, well maintained, painted, all the fixtures are working. As I told you, having the basic furnishing and fittings. So if you can do that, first you make your apartment or flat habitable, attractive for a prospective tenant. Once you have that prospective tenant in your crosshairs, then you figure out, how do I protect my asset that he doesn't trash it or he refuses to leave and I have to go into a court case or start a judicial process to recover it. So there you will figure out what is your background. Are you a professional? Do you work in a good corporation? What sort of a work do you do? So immediately, if he can figure that out, he will know where you're coming from and how safe is his property in your hands and how well you maintain it. That is why, in most of the cases, as landlords, many people tend to hesitate to rent it out to singles. Because in the case of a single, the risk is higher, they feel, that you will not be responsible. Whereas in case of if you're renting out to a family, then they know for a fact that, okay, there's a husband and wife, there might be a elderly person also in that flat, or they might have children. So the whole idea that they will turn out to be rogue tenants, if I can call so, is very, very less. But a singular person can turn out to be a rogue tenant because he might fool you into thinking that he is working in a big company or he is a professional, and it might not turn out to be so. And if that doesn't happen, then you're in the wrong. But however, having said that, nowadays, in most places, you need the police verification of your tenant to be done, where you have to give the details of your tenant to the local police station and they clear it. So, to that extent, maybe it will mitigate a little, but I don't think you should depend only upon that. You should do your own homework as a landlord.
And so for landlords who are not willing to, actively take care or manage their properties, is it beneficial to give it away to a, formal institution like a Nestaway or a Hiranandani rental? Is it beneficial
I
basically?
believe if you're lazy, it's beneficial. No? Because suppose I am lazy or I'm at a faraway place and I'm sitting in Delhi and I have a place in Bangalore to rent, I might not be able to manage it. Then if I give it away to a company, then naturally it is more beneficial for me also that the company for a fee is maintaining it, taking care of it, and ensuring all the due diligence processes are taking place.
Correct. And is there a amount or something? How much should I pay to a company or someone who's managing my property?
Well, it is completely negotiable, frankly speaking. But usually, these people, I think, would be happy if you give them the exclusive mandate to rent out your property because then they will play on the brokerage. So, literally, for any landlord, he gets only 11 months' rent. Every year, they'll take away the 1 month rent and they will do it.
So, lastly, what can a landlord do to improve their rental yields?
Well, as I said, the best way is to maintain your property, to keep it absolutely so good that the maintenance for the tenant is much lesser. Otherwise, for you, the maintenance, because for every little thing, you might not want to go to a landlord, and it starts irking you. That's one. Two, the more semi furnished it is, the better it is for you. Like, suppose I can throw in the white goods in your kitchen. I can put a fridge, I can put a microwave, I can give you a washing machine. Then these are things which are not so personal that you need to have your own. You can adjust to some other machine also. So you will then come only with your personal effects, literally. You understand? So that helps a little as most of the time I think in a good service apartment, Airbnb, these are always there. But if you can furnish your apartment much better and keep it clean, keep it of a good quality, I think you'll attract a high sort of a tenant, a higher sensitive tenant who is willing to pay more. So your yields will go
Okay.
up.
I think so. We pretty much covered everything in the rental market. Do you have any closing thoughts or something that we missed on?
I think my closing thoughts are very clear. As far as the rental market is concerned in India, it is a growth market. There will be a huge leap and surge in rentals because the younger generations will not be able to afford to buy property straight away. So they will go for rentals and then only they'll buy the properties. So there'll be a surge. So both landlords and tenants have to figure out, as you said, the common ground where you're both meeting your aspirations and expectations. So, whether it is furnishing the flat or maintaining it or responding to somebody's requirement or need, to have that sort of a working relationship is necessary. It cannot be a very hands off, remote, I don't care sort of a situation. So, and I'm sure it will develop that way. But if the rules and the regulations also help, then they should be pushing both parties to come to this common meeting ground because it's a win-win situation. Instead of keeping a flat locked, it has no meaning to keep an apartment locked.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today,
you for
sir.
having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of PropSutra. If you found this episode helpful and insightful, please press the like, share, and subscribe button. And if you have a message or a real estate story, drop us a message and we'd love to feature it in a future podcast. Until next time, happy renting and investing.